Hey everybody, it's a Monday night and we're going to do a round the world update here. We're going to start this one a little bit differently. We're actually going to start on my Grammie Tank here, and then we're going to come back to my 29 Miscellaneous. And the reason we're going to do that is because my striped Raphael is out right now. It seems to be going through one of those phases where it's looking for a new apartment. And real quick, while we can still see it, if you see that little orange fin sticking out from behind the rocks back there, that is my red-tail loach. So it's still in there and still living underneath of that log. My Moonlight Grammie passed away in this tank, and that was the last of my original Grammies. And everybody else in here so far as I know, is doing well. I did see a few scratches on my clown loach, and I think that was because it was trying to get in the same cave as that red-tail loach, and they probably had a little bit of a squabble. If you look, you can see the tail of my Angelfish loach. So they're both under there together, and apparently they're not having any issues with that. Loaches are pretty gregarious. You know, they enjoy company. And it doesn't even have to be other loaches of the same species. As long as there's loaches together, I tend to find that they get along pretty well. Now, the red-tail loach is not very friendly. So it's kind of unusual to see it, you know, side by side with that Angelfish loach in there in the same little cave. I suspect that's where the injuries here on my clown loach came from, was trying to squeeze into the same cave with that red-tail loach. And yeah, you got a little look at the those white scrape marks down the side. I suspect that was that red-tail loach having none of that. It's quite possibly not really happy about the Angelfish loach in there either. So that's it as far as I can think of as far as things to update you on this tank. I really need to get in here and do a water change. That's actually on my agenda tonight. I want to do a water change on this tank. I want to do a full water change. I want to get in there and wipe down the glass. I want to get out my siphon and try to siphon some of this green junk out of there and just reduce it a little bit. And I'm going to get in there and do a filter change as well tonight. I also probably ought to get in and really clean up the spray bar and pull the plumbing and hardware and everything apart. You can see my whiptail catfish on the intake right there. But you can see how cruddy and gross all that is, and you can see how I've got stuff, you know, inside the spray bar that's coming out where the water flow is. So it probably wouldn't hurt me to get in there and just pull that off and give that a little bit of a scrub down. So we'll see whether I get to that or not. But I am planning on doing a full water change on this tank tonight. So, you know, while I'm in there, hopefully that will be what gets done. So, of course, my striped Raphael didn't move that whole time, but at any rate, come back to my 29 Miscellaneous, which is where we normally start. And in this tank, you'll notice, if you haven't been following along, that I've got two new angelfish. These are not new angelfish per se, but they're new to this tank. They were the ones that were in my 20-gallon angelfish tank down here. And when I lost the two angelfish that were in this tank, the one was my oldest angelfish. She was about 6 years old, and she finally passed away. And so I moved these two from the 20-gallon tank they were in, and I was able to bring the angelfish that I had in my 10-gallon office tank down and put it in the 20-gallon that these two came out of, and we'll see that at the end of this video as we get around there. So other than that, I can't think anything else really about this tank. I did a water change, of course, when I had, you know, the dead fish in there. We removed the bodies, and one, of course, I had to euthanize. But I got the filter intake cleaned up. We did new filter change. I wiped down the glass and did just a nice thorough water change and everything to get this tank cleaned up before I brought the new fish in. So kind of still looks the same, but we have different angelfish in it now. So that's my 29-gallon Miscellaneous. We've already seen my Grammie Tank, which is usually number 2 on the list. And we will get to my Tbar tank. Now, the namesake of this tank, my Tbar, you can see in the back there, I believe that is a she, and she is pretty skittish. And recently she dashed or something and bashed her face, and she had some pretty serious injuries right between her eyes. And you can kind of see it's sort of healed over, but up on her forehead now it looks like she might have a couple of bumps or something there. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on with her, why she's become so accident prone all of a sudden. She's not approaching old age or anything. She's only about 4, and 7 to 10 is their normal lifespan, so you know, she's got a long way to go. But the injury healed up nicely. I was a little bit worried about it. I thought it might be hole in the head disease, but doesn't appear to be. It really does just appear to be an injury, and now that it's healed up, everything looks good. Now, I did a water change on this tank recently, but it could probably use another one. If you look around closely on the bottom, you will notice lots and lots and lots of fish poop, and that's because I have a great big pleco in here, and the plecos are algae eating and pooping machines. That's all they do is eat and poop. So probably wouldn't hurt to get in here and do another water change too, especially since I have a fish that has recently had injuries and is recovering from them. I also had some of my snails in here that were breeding the other day, and that little white square in the corner is actually tape, but you can also see, or possibly you can't, but there is a little floating cluster of snails in there. So that doesn't look like it took. The way the snails do it, and we're going to try to have a look and see if we can see any. No, I don't see any. The way they do it is they lay their eggs just above the water line so that the eggs stay moist but are not in the water itself. And I did find, hang on half a second here, I did find a batch the other day. No, I don't see any down here either. So it doesn't look like they successfully laid eggs anywhere. And while we've got the lid open, I don't know if we can see it or not. It doesn't look like we can. Oh yeah, we can right here. See, this is a Anubias flower. So I've got another flower. And then this here, if you could notice this is just another leaf opening up. So that's all that's going on in my Tbar tank. I had some snails breeding, and I had an injury on my Tbar, who's now hiding in the back. And other than that, everything's just ticking over nice and smoothly with my Tbar tank. So moving on to my Black Ghost Knifefish tank. This is a 40 breeder. Now, not too long ago, I had one of my light fixtures burn out in this tank. I had 2 twin tube fixtures on it, giving me 4 fluorescent tubes on it. And when the one burned out, I just said, I'll get around to it. I've got some other fixtures in the other room. I'll put it on there. Today I was actually going through, and this is just to give you an example of how I always talk about how time gets away from me and I lose track of time, and I think it's only been a few days, but it's really been much longer than that. The video I shot the day the light burned out, I actually shot a video about it. That was just over 2 months ago. So while I've been thinking, oh yeah, I'll just go grab that, you know, I'll put it off, I'll do it later. I mean, all I have to do is walk in the other room, pick up a fixture, put some tubes in it, and plug it in on top of this light, and I'm done. It's sitting on a shelf in the other room. And for 2 months, I've just been thinking, I'll do that later, I'll get to that tomorrow, whatever. And 2 full months have gone by, and I still have not put the light fixture on this tank. So having said that, not really a lot going on in here, with the exception of one of my viewers gave me some rainbow fish, and one of them was a little dwarf rainbow. You can kind of see it, it's facing us, so you're not really getting to appreciate any of its colors right now. There you go. Oh, look at that. That fish is just so stunning. So that's a little dwarf neon rainbow fish, and I've only got that one, and I really want to get a school of 6 or 7 of them, maybe 8 of them going on in this tank. I think that's about full size. It might get a little bit bigger than that, but probably not much. And it would just be stunning in this tank. So they're pretty expensive fish. I can't afford it right now. I have so many other things I need to take care of before I think about buying any more fish at the moment. But at some point, I really do want to build up to that school and get, you know, a proper amount of those rainbow fish in there. Not only for the health of the fish, I think it's a gorgeous fish. I'd love to see more of them. I've never seen them before, and I'm not even sure where I'd be able to get them. I might have to mail order them, but that's going to be down the road. Again, I can't do anything about it now anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But man, is that a stunning fish. And I keep thinking, if that's one by itself, imagine a school of them where they're in there interacting and they're, you know, competing with each other. it's just going to be amazing. So look forward to that. That is something that's going to happen. My 125-gallon native tank, if you will notice, it looks much, much brighter. It looks like I just put brand new lights on it and everything else. It looks so much brighter. And that is because in addition to doing a big water change, I did about a 60% water change and got a lot of the tannin stained water out of there. I also did a filter change while I was in there and got that done because this tank is really, really heavily stocked, and changing the filter as often as I can is always a good idea. But the one thing I did while I was in there is I wiped down the underside of all of the glass. And it was green and gross and grungy, you know, all down on this end of the tank. But when I got to this end of the tank has these little dome lights. And I currently have LEDs in them. But you can actually see right here on the corner. See where my thumb is? You see that dark green? That's a little bit that I missed. While I was wiping the glass down from underneath, you know, I had my hand inside the tank and I was wiping the underside. These thick, it scared me at first. It reminded me of there's an old episode of Star Trek from way back in the day where some little weird neck sucker huggy things would like slap onto the back of your neck, and they were like wet plastic, and that's what it felt like. I jerked my hand out of the tank because it just felt like one of these face hugger things slapped onto the back of my hand. And what it turned out to be was a thick mat of really warm, gross green. I'm guessing it was a mixture of algae and cyanobacteria. It was just this thick biomat, I'll call it. And it was really warm because it was sitting right underneath the lights. And, you know, I'm in there expecting to be wiping algae off the glass. And to have this big thing, it was like a pancake slapped onto the back of my hand and like wrapped around my wrist. It felt like something grabbed me. But that is how thick and gross and nasty all the stuff growing just at this end, right where these two lights are directly almost in contact with the glass itself. All along here where I simply have a shop light. This is just a 4-foot shop light with LEDs in it. This was your average, just a lot of green algal growth growing along the hood. And what it was doing was blocking a ton of my light. And in addition to blocking the light, it was dyeing the light or changing the color of the light. I'm not sure. Filtering the light? I guess filtering the light would be, though, not necessarily dyeing the light. But it turned the light green. And it made the whole tank look sort of underwater, swampy, weird green color. And I don't mind that a little bit. You know, you can see the sun, we'll call it, the light shining down through the leaves, and you get that nice green sort of dapple effect as the plants move around. I like that. That looks good. It looks pretty. It looks natural. When the whole tank just looked this sort of greenish, glowing, otherworldly, you know, it was dark. And all of that was just because I didn't get in there for a while and clean all the scum off the underside of the glass. So keep that in mind. You know, you do when you wipe down the glass, you also have to get in there and wipe down the underside of that glass from time to time as well. My snail tank we're not even going to talk about. It's a snail tank. Nothing's changed about that. We've got lots to go, and we're already 15 minutes in, so it's a snail tank. It's got snails in it. Excuse me. My gudgeon tank here, this is another one I really need to do a water change on. It's so lightly stocked and there's so little, you know, debris and stuff that ever develops on the bottom. You can see those few little specks and spots. That's little bits of uneaten food from dinner last night. Nobody went around and cleaned them up, so I'll go a little easier when I feed them tonight. I'll put a little less food in the tank. But you can see the water level's a little low. So that needs, you know, addressing, and of course you can see some of this stuff down here is, you know, dead, rotten plant material, and that needs to come out of there and get cleaned up. So we're in need of a water change, but it's nothing urgent, and that's usually, you know, when it's not urgent, it's something that I can just go ahead and put it off, and I usually do. So we'll see how this one goes. My gudgeon's still getting bigger. I swear this fish is still growing and still getting a fatter belly. I know all we can see now at the moment is a silhouette, but someday I will get better and more appropriate lighting on this tank, and I will also get in there and thin out some of that thick Java fern Speaking of Java Fern, I did have one of my viewers today finally purchase one of those huge masses that I've been talking about from time to time. I still have a couple left, so if you're interested in buying any Java Fern, I've got some Aponigeton right now. I've always got Water Sprite. You never know what I'll have, so if you're interested in aquatic plants, I'll have my email down below. You can hit me up and we can talk about getting you some plants out of my tanks. So this is my 125-gallon tank, as I call it. It is a sort of African-themed tank. Oh, and look at this. Looks like we've got a dead rainbow fish. That's interesting. As of yesterday, I saw no indication whatsoever that I had anything amiss in this tank at all. I was actually just about to start talking about the rainbow fish. These little ones here, these 4, are new. These are the ones that were given to me by my viewer, in addition to that other one we saw in my Black Ghost Knifefish tank earlier. So I also need to find out exactly what species these are. I'm pretty sure I know. I think they're sold by PetSmart as Australian rainbow fish, and I can look up the actual species easy enough from that. But this tank used to be an African-themed tank for the most part. We've got my Tenopoma here, and my Synodontis catfish is hiding down here in the cave, and I got the Congo tetras, but the Congo tetras are almost gone. I've only got one male and a few females left, and I'm really leaning towards putting more rainbow fish in this tank because they're absolutely stunning, gorgeous fish. I never really appreciated rainbow fish because I'd only ever seen them in the stores. I'd never actually really seen one grow into maturity in a tank, and now that I have, they're just really fantastic fish. So I'm looking forward to these little ones growing up. Hopefully they'll get about as big as these Marcy rainbow fish here. These Marcy are a hybrid. They're not anything you can find in nature. If you are interested in these, the closest you're going to find is the Parkinson's or Parkinsonii, not sure how to pronounce that. But the Parkinson's rainbow fish is, I believe, one of the fish that these have been hybridized from. So if you're looking for a rainbow fish that looks as similar as you can to these, it's going to be your Parkinson's rainbow fish. And then again, I need to figure out what these little guys are and get them a bigger school. In fact, I'm going to leave the 3 females alone, and I'm just going to add 3 or 4 more males, and I'll have a nice little school, and that'll provide me with a lot of color. So other than that, I can't think of much else going on in the tank. I did lose a Congo tetra not long ago, and I also lost my long-finned bristlenose pleco that had been in this tank for several years. So that, again, is not a case of old age. It was a pleco. They can live 10, 15 years, and that one was only about 3 or 4, so there's no way that one died of old age. But I did find it down at this end of the tank, sort of buried in a cave. It was actually wedged between these rocks here, and now that I've sort of opened these rocks up and allowed a little bit of space between them, I've noticed that another one of the plecos that's in this tank has been burrowing and digging back here. You can kind of see how the sand and everything is piled up. So I'm not sure if that's pre-spawning behavior. I'm not really sure what's going on with there. But I did lose my long-fin bristlenose pleco. So all I have left pleco-wise now is the 3 chocolate zebra plecos. So yeah, that's all I can think of now as far as what's going on with the tank. Now, I will say this one is another one that I need to get in and do a little bit of maintenance on. I thinned out the plants recently. I did a big water change, which reduced the tannins. And when you reduce the tannins, you allow more light in and so on and so forth. And you can see how brightly lit the tank is once again. And as a result, you can probably tell all through here I'm starting to get all this growth on the glass again, so time to get in there and wipe all that down. It's just sort of constant maintenance. Anybody who thinks that you've got a tank that just looks like this all the time, you know, that's not the way it works. You've got to constantly get in there and do it all the time. It's kind of like having a pretty lawn. It only stays pretty if you constantly work on it and constantly mow it and constantly keep on top of it. Now, I'm not trying to turn anybody away from wanting to keep fish. It's not difficult, but you do have to keep on top of it, and that's what I need to do. I need to get in some of these tanks and wipe down the glass and get them looking good again. So this is my 20-gallon Angelfish tank that I've got down here. It's kind of in an awkward position. I either have to stand really close in front of it and hold the camera against my chest almost, or I have to stand at a funny angle. So this is the angelfish that was in my 10-gallon office tank. This one I kind of rescued and saved. It was at the PetSmart, and it looked really bad. It was all gray, it had fuzz all over its lips, and it didn't look like it was going to be alive for too much longer. But I saw potential in it. And I swear this fish always puts its back to me whenever I'm filming it. It does exactly what it's doing now. It just turns away from me and just says, "You're not looking at me," while with that camera thing in your hand. But trust me, it is a gorgeous angelfish. I could kind of tell it was going to be when it grew up, if I could get it to live. And I did. It actually survived. And now it's got some of that sort of pearl scale look to it, where it's got that sort of sparkly, shiny appearance. Really, really good looking angelfish. And it's not a really big angelfish, so it actually looks quite nice in this 20-gallon tank. It was getting a little too big for the 10-gallon that I had it in upstairs, but it fits in this little 20-gallon quite nicely. So down here, that's just a quarantine tank. Nothing changed in there. I've just got a little resident guppy that lives in there just to keep the tank cycled in. And I also have those 2 coolie loaches that I never ever see. So I did see one darting around the tank the other day, so at least one of them is still in there and still alive. My Brackish tank, and again I'm going to have a little difficulty standing in front of this one because of the way I've got stuff piled on the floor behind me. Nothing really to talk about on this one. Again, you know, part of my normal maintenance. You can see sort of these red clumps starting to form, so within another week or 2 I'll be going water change and getting in there with my siphon hose, and I'll be able to, you know, get that out of there. The fish are doing okay. I haven't really noticed any dead shrimp or anything. Just not a lot to talk about with this tank. It's always worth looking at for a few minutes because Butterbean is just such a cool fish, and it's just a pretty tank all the way around. You don't see too many Brackish tanks, and you really don't see too many Brackish tanks that are planted. Now, I'll grant you it's not lush and gorgeous necessarily, and it is just some Java growing in there, but it's a planted Brackish tank, and it's got a really, really cool figure 8 puffer named Butterbean living in it, and that's what really makes the tank. So that's it for my fish tanks. We're back where we started, but now we're going to have one final look at what has been occupying most of my time in here, and that is this center area, which I refer to as my garden tank area. Now, it's been quite a bit sort of disassembled since the last time I did any kind of serious video about the room in general. I have shot some video of this, but for those of you who only sort of catch up with these videos, we got a lot to go over, so I'll try to make it brief. I eventually got my crab out of this tank. If you'll remember, I had one red-clawed crab that was still living in this tank, and then of course I got male and female guppies and endlers in there, and so that's just a breeding frenzy, and I've got more little baby guppies and endlers than I know what to do with, but we'll get to that. That tank is going to be part of this whole sort of area grouping of tanks over time. So the center section here, this middle 20 long, I don't know if you can tell or not, but I've got a 20 long, a 20 long, and then down here is a 10. So this 20 long has a little pump back here that pumps the water up, and then it just flows down and gives me a little bit of a waterfall effect. The crab in there has plenty of places to hide. He's got sand all on the left side. He's got caves and land and everything to dig in. And then, of course, over here we've got the watery end of the tank. And we'll see if we can actually see the crab in there somewhere. I don't at the moment. This is the first time I've looked in the tank and not actually been able to just readily identify the crab. It's normally just sitting right in there somewhere easy to be seen. So that gives you a better idea of what the tank actually looks like. None of this stuff is anything the crab can get a hold of. It's all outside and over the top, so it just looks nice from the outside, but the crab can't get to it. This is the only thing that the crab might eventually be able to get to, and it's not really even supposed to be in there. It's supposed to be kind of up like that. This is water sprite. This will start growing up and out. So this is one of the new shoots. Some of the older stuff that I just planted in, this is all going to sort of die off because this was submerged, and now it's got to get used to growing above the water. So hopefully that'll take. And then, of course, Java fern is the same way, and we'll have some Java fern growing and everything in there, and hopefully that'll look pretty good. Now, for this back section, I've got plans. And you can see the room is a wreck right now. I've been down here tinkering with all kind of stuff. I've even got this is a thing of eggshells that I haven't actually put in any of the tanks yet. I'm not even sure what tank that's going to go in. So this tank, I'm starting to build sort of a backdrop waterfall thing. I needed to walk away from it and sort of rethink how I'm doing it. I was having issues getting it to work properly, or work at all, really. I can get the water to pump and flow. I just can't get the waterproof part of the background. And I've got so much time and effort invested into what I've got so far that my better judgment is telling me I need to just start over and do something completely different. But that determined part of me is thinking, oh, I've got so much time and effort into what I've started. I just really want to make what I've got work, you know. But I know I need to just start over. So I kind of walked away from that altogether for a little while, and we're going to wait until the creative bug hits me again. In the meantime, as I've pointed out a few times now, I've got some of these fish tanks down here that really do need actual attention, like water changes and filter changes and things like that. So the creativity can put on hold, and I can get on to doing some of the stuff I really actually need to do. This is just some of the rocks that have actually come out of this tank, and this gives you a little better look at what my dead nettles are doing down there. It's just looking fantastic, and that's all just from this one little flower pot. So there you go, everybody. I'm gonna end up over here rather than looking back at my 29 miscellaneous, which is where we normally start. This was a bit of an unusual round the world update. I just checked, and my striped Raphael is indeed still sitting right in that same spot, so we didn't really have to do anything different today after all. Anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, that way you won't miss anything. Don't forget, this is the garden tank area. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you real soon on the next one.